Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode on the Sports Stories podcast. This is your host, Seiji McSwain, and I'm really happy to get into this episode. So now for this one, I'm going to be going over the Leonard Fournette Fournette's career, and just kind of how the hype possibly led to his downfall, but then he ended up reviving his career, as many people know. So I'm just going to be going over the timeline and showing Leonard Fournette's career throughout time. Now, starting off at the beginning, obviously in high school, he was the top-ranked prospect. I mean, he was one of the best running backs that many people have ever seen at the high school level. He was just big size. He's already basically college ready by the time he hit freshman year, I believe. I've heard some stories where he was just out of proportion, he was out of basically looking like he wasn't a freshman. He didn't look like a freshman. He was huge. I think he came into high school at 280 pounds, and he was about over 6 feet tall. So, I mean, he was already a beast at the level of high school. And then in his senior year, I believe he committed to LSU, or previously, even after or before that, he committed to LSU. And in his freshman year in 2014 at LSU, Fournette played 13 games. He rushed for 1,034 yards on 187 attempts and scored 10 touchdowns. He was just a freak at LSU. And then again in his sophomore year in 2015, he rushed for 1,953 yards on 300 attempts for 23 touchdowns in just 12 games. And I believe he was 6th in Heisman voting that year. And then in 2016, his junior year, his last year at LSU, he sprained his ankle, and that limited him to only playing 7 games. He ended his junior year with 843 yards on 129 attempts and scored 8 touchdowns. And I mean, it was still a really good stat line, just looking from the inside, inside out. It looks really good here. And then in 2017, he was drafted with the 4th overall pick by the Jacksonville Jaguars, which basically many people saw him as a top 5 draft pick. Nowadays, it seems like picking a running back that high up probably wouldn't be the best move. And you'll see later how Leonard Fournette kind of started the kind of trend with running backs, where it's kind of they're in injury-prone position again with Todd Gurley and Christian McCaffrey. With the likes of them, I feel like Leonard Fournette kind of falls into that, where he kind of showed the start of why many people and owners and teams feel like drafting a running back first round just isn't that much of a good idea. But in 2017, his rookie year, he played in 13 games, rushed for 1,040 yards on 268 attempts and 9 touchdowns, which is a really good stat. And then that year, the Jaguars made it to the playoffs with a 10-6 record, and they almost made it to the Super Bowl. They ended up losing in the divisional round against the Patriots, and a really close game. I remember that one. Stephon Gilmore got a great pass deflection to end off the game. And overall, that was a really good season. It looked like the Jaguars had many seasons in the tank to possibly make a run for the Super Bowl. They had a really young team overall, so it just looked like a really great setup for the Jaguars. But this is when things kind of started to turn around for the worst. In 2018, Fournette dealt with a hamstring injury, which limited him to only playing in 8 games. He ended up rushing for 439 yards on 133 attempts with 5 touchdowns, and the team ended up with a 5-11 record. And there just didn't look good. I mean, hamstring injury, it happens. You're running back second year, so a lot of people brushed it off. It wasn't the best stat line, obviously. I mean, he only played in 8 games. But this year, his second year in the league, that's when a lot of people saw kind of the negatives of Leonard Fournette. The hype coming out of high school and the hype that he had at LSU and going into the draft in his rookie year, it stayed with that hype. And a lot of people were thinking that he'd be the next great running back, in the league for many years to come. But then in 2018, that's when a lot of people see that he wasn't the physical runner that he was at LSU. He was more trying to be a strategic and elusive back instead of a back that can, plow through you and, make you miss tackles just by shedding you off. So, really, Fournette kind of seemed like he was moving out of what his attributes were. He's a big dude, and he wasn't really using his size as much as him using his legs. And don't get me wrong, it was those are some great moves, but Leonard Fournette is more of a power back, and he was trying to be more of a a trickster back, kind of an Alvin Kamara type, where he can juke you out and he can make you miss tackles just through him moving, but Leonard Fournette can make you miss tackles from you just trying to tackle him, and you can't tackle him, you can't bring him down. And Leonard Fournette was really moving away from that, and that's when a lot of people started to see kind of the downfall of Leonard Fournette. And especially in 2018, this is really kind of the years that started the kind of decline in the need for running backs and the decline for paying running backs high amounts of money just because of how injury prone they were. And then in 2019, Leonard Fournette rushed for 1,152 yards on 265 attempts and scored 3 touchdowns in 15 games. 15 games, 3 touchdowns, not the best stat line. Again, from the outside looking in, looks like a great stat line. He rushed for over 1,000 yards on 265 attempts. The 3 touchdowns kind of lackluster, but for 15 games especially, but not too bad of a stat line. The Jaguars ended up 6-10 though that season, and it's not really only just Leonard Fournette's fault. It's a combination of many things. Mainly the downfall of Blake Bortles and company. Just wasn't looking the best. And yeah, again, here is where you see more of a timid Leonard Fournette, more hesitant on the run, and didn't really have the best ball carrier vision in the league. And I believe there was a stat line that showed that, in every direction he was actually doing worse. Negative 10% every time he ran the ball in every single direction. He did not excel in a special direction or a certain direction of where he ran the ball, and it just looked like he was getting worse at this point. And a lot of people kind of wrote him off as a bust after this 3rd year. And I don't think he's a bust currently. And that just might be due to his time with Tampa Bay, which I'll get to later on. But even with 3 years, you can't really label somebody a bust. Maybe once it hits that 5th year, maybe you can say, yeah, it wasn't the best. 3rd year, I could say, yeah, maybe, he might have not been the best pick, but also, he still looked really good. It wasn't like his stats looked good, but he wasn't making anything for the team, from what it looked like. He ran all these yards, ran over 1,000 yards. He had a low yards per attempt, and also just, the team ending in a 6-10 record. He shouldn't be having to carry the team on his back all the time, but it just looked like overall the Jaguars were looking to rebuild at this point. So they ended up declining Fournette's 5th year option, which is made for rookies, so just to extend the deal for another year. But they ended up declining his 5th year option, which basically means that the team is giving up on you at this point, or possibly trying to give you more money. But usually, in most occasions, it's the 5th year option is declined, so that means that the team is looking in their future, and they're probably not going to be moving on with you. And later on, after they declined that 5th year option, they ended up waiving Fournette from the team. And in 2020, I think this is the start of his revival of his career. Fournette was picked up by the Buccaneers off that rookie deal that he still had, I believe. Maybe I'm not sure. I'm not totally sure about the contract details, but he still was with the Bucs for 2 years. But in 2020, he shared this running back role, which is kind of his first time really sharing a running back role, and him being the second string running back basically. And he had to share the roles with Ronald Jones, who in 2020 looked like one of the best running backs in the league. I mean, he was amazing. He was electrifying. He could run all over the field, and it looked like the Buccaneers believed in that too. So, Leonard Fournette played in 13 games, but he only started in 3 of those games. He ended up rushing for 367 yards on 9 attempts and scored 6 touchdowns. The Buccaneers ended up with an 11-5 record and ended up winning the Super Bowl. So, in this postseason run by the Buccaneers, where they did beat the Chiefs, I believe, this is where Leonard Fournette got his name, Playoff Lenny. I mean, he was electrifying in the playoffs. He, I think, in his time with the Buccaneers, especially in the playoffs, that's when he tapped into who he was at LSU. He's a physical back, and a lot of people wanted to see that physical back that he was at LSU instead of a more elusive back. I mean, he could be elusive, but again, I mean, that steam that he had just going downhill, north to south, is just, amazing that he had. And he tapped into it in this playoff run by the Buccaneers in the 2020 season. He ended up doing, very well against the Chiefs in the Super Bowl, and, won the Super Bowl. Ended up winning the Super Bowl that year. And then in 2021, which is the last season, Fournette had more of a major role in the running game for Tampa, mainly due to Ronald Jones being I believe he was injured like a couple of times last season. He just wasn't the most healthy running back, so Leonard Fournette kind of stepped in to have more of a major role. He played in 14 games last season, started in 13 of them. And he ran for 812 yards on 180 attempts and scored 8 touchdowns. Now, the Buccaneers ended up with a 13-4 record and lost in the divisional round to the Rams. And, I mean, he still looked really good this season. His running game hasn't looked the best in the regular season. It's mainly in the playoffs where he kind of makes some more steam, I guess, with his running and his running style. But, sorry, that was my chair. But, I think it's just, he wasn't playing that well this regular season. I mean, granted, he was playing more games and he was starting in more games, which means that he was getting more reps, than compared to the 2020 season, where I guess he kind of felt like he needed to prove himself, and the playoffs is like one of the biggest stages to really prove yourself. So, I think in the playoffs, he plays a little bit harder for the Buccaneers than, compared to how he plays in the regular season. But after the end of the season, I believe just a few months ago, basically after the end of the season, the Buccaneers ended up re-signing Leonard Fournette to a 2 to 3 year deal, I believe. And, which means that they kind of believe in him to do better. And I think he's starting to revive his career again. Granted, I don't think he's the player that many people thought he'd be, especially with the number 4 overall pick in the draft. I don't think he really lived up. I don't think he's gonna live up to the hype, and he hasn't lived up to the hype yet. I think the time has passed for it to continue, but I still think he'll be a really great running back in the league. I mean, he's still young. I believe he's still in his prime, basically. I believe 3 years, so he would have been 24, I believe 24 when he when he was waived by the Jaguars, and so he's got to be like near 27 now, and I mean, he's still basically in his prime as a running back, and I think he can push out some good few more years with the Buccaneers and establish himself and establish his career as a running back. But again, I think that hype for the 4th round pick has passed on him. I think many people have dismissed him now. But I do think he still is a great running back, and he does still have time in the league to really make a name for himself and solidify himself as one of the best running backs in the league. And now that was really my short video on how Leonard Fournette kind of revived his career. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. If you guys think that, he revived his career, or maybe he possibly didn't revive his career and he's still kind of he's still kind of a draft bust. Just let me know down in the comments below what you guys think about Leonard Fournette. But overall, I think this is really great to look into, just seeing the hype that he had going from high school to college, and then college into the NFL, and it kind of dipping down. But this kind of success story with the Buccaneers that he's had has been great to watch, especially in person now. And I think overall it's a really great, inspiring story that Leonard Fournette has created for himself. But other than that, make sure you share, like, and comment on this video, and make sure you share it to anybody that would be interested in learning more about Leonard Fournette or how he's revived his career. Besides that, thank you for listening and watching all the way through. Again, this is Seiji McSwain, and have a great rest of your day.